Welcome back to Yang Daily. I'll be your host, Alex Cheney, bringing you all the Yang news you need to live your life right. Okay, we've got a lot to cover today, starting with news for the podcast itself. So, as you know, I spent some time trying to figure out a way to afford to continue the podcast. It occurs to me that I haven't really talked much about what goes into making the podcast, so some of you might be wondering why I'm making such a big deal of needing to fund it. You might be thinking, it's just a 10-minute podcast. Why not just get a job and do it after work? And I can certainly understand why you might think that. I've been guilty of it myself at times, but the reality is that this 10-minute podcast is a full-time job for me. More, actually, since I have been working 7 days a week and have recently switched to 6 days a week. It takes, on average, 2 to 3 hours to collect the news, another hour or two to respond in places where I feel it's important to do so, like educating people in the comments on policy, creating informational threads on Twitter, promoting and spreading things that need exposure for the movement, etc. It's another couple of hours to filter through the news that I collected, figuring out what's important, reading the articles, finding the details that I need to convey to you all. It's another hour or so to incorporate it into an efficient and comprehensive script, then 15 to 20 minutes to record the episode, 20 to 30 minutes to edit the audio so it's not offensive to the ears, maybe another 20 minutes to upload it to Podbean, YouTube, the Trickle Up, and announce it. It's a lot of time. That's the reason I do it to begin with, if you'll recall, so that just one of us can spend that time instead of all of us. So in short, I really don't have the time to do the podcast on top of anything else that might provide a sustainable income. Wish that I could. So, I need an income source to afford to keep doing this. What are the options? Well, I've looked into a number of avenues: advertising, sponsorship, merchandising, donations, whatever I could think of. I talked to a number of people for advice. Not all of those threads are resolved for certain yet, but for the most part, not a lot has panned out. If you have any knowledge of something you think could work, please email or message me. I'm open to suggestions. For now, however, there is one clear path to pursue. The big news is that the Yang Daily finally has a Patreon page. I've been resisting this because, well, I'm doing this out of passion, not to make money, and we didn't have a big enough following, frankly, but our community has grown, and practically speaking, I'm nearing the end of my savings, so we need a solution if the podcast is going to continue. As much as I wish we had a UBI and I could keep volunteering forever, it's going to be up to you, the listeners, to decide if this podcast is worth continuing. It's like Yang says, subscription is the only model that's working for good journalism right now, if you can swing it. We're working toward a future where everyone is free to pursue work that we care about, supported by a UBI and a government that serves the people. Right now, I need your help to pursue the work I care about, which is to help get us to that future as best I can. We have hundreds of daily listeners at this point, and my cost of living is quite low. If everyone listening donated just $2 a month, we would be set. Done. Good to go forever. Permanent humanity first advocate right here. If we only get close to what I need, maybe I can find supplements to make up the difference. But at least for now, the bulk needs to come from the community. My hope is that you find the efficient information I provide through this podcast to have at least that much value. If you're listening to it every day, I would think you're getting at least a couple of bucks a month of value from the time you save and the news you get that you might otherwise have missed. We're talking 7 cents per episode here. This is an easily achievable goal if everyone works together. And that's what this coalition is all about. And you'll also be getting something extra for supporting the community. I've already put up a poll on the Patreon page for what patron-only content you would all like to see. You might get to help shape the podcast with feedback on what structure and content you'd like to see in it, whether I should add video for the YouTube channel, whether we should get a community Discord. I might add some blog-like thoughts on politics and my personal life. I might do a bloopers reel for each episode of all my screw-ups during recording. Yes, it happens. A lot. You get the idea. And I'll, of course, also be accepting ideas from you. The donation tiers also offer special perks as a thank you for making this possible, which range from shout-outs on the podcast to accessing the polls and extra content to choosing topics for the show or being featured on it as a guest. These perks will likely be adjusted somewhat depending on the community feedback. So at this point, you might be wondering, I hope, how exactly you go about becoming a patron. Well, you go to patreon.com/YangDaily. which is, of course, in the transcription and the links. There are 5 donation tiers you can choose from with a list of the perks you'll get for each. Or if you can afford to go a bit above one of the tiers but not to the next, you can scroll down past the About section, click the Become a Patron button that will pop up in the top right, and donate a dollar amount of your choice at the bottom, where it says Make a Custom Pledge. You will still get all the perks your donation amount qualifies for. Donations are made with a credit or debit card or PayPal account. Your donation will be sent on the first of each month. You can cancel at any time. If we do not receive enough donations to continue the podcast, then I will either refund your donation or continue the podcast for one more month. So there's no risk that your donation will go to waste. The whole sign-up process only takes a couple of minutes, and it's very secure. And to be clear, I'm not trying to pressure anyone into this. I know that we have a million causes for donation out there and that it's economically rough times. If for whatever reason you cannot or choose not to donate, then it is what it is. No hard feelings. I'm just laying out the reality for you all to make the choice. If there's not enough support, then I will take that to mean this podcast is not worth as much as I thought and find some other way to contribute to the movement in whatever capacity that I can afford. If it is important to you, however, then this is the time to make that clear. This is how Scott is able to be a full-time advocate for UBI. If I save you all the time and keep you informed and empowered, and each of you chip in a tiny bit, then through mutual support, we can make this crazy dream come true. Practicality of the podcast aside, I truly don't want to lose this community that we've built up through shared purpose. I would much rather expand it and make us more connected than ever. All right, stepping down off the soapbox, let's get to the news. Last week, the Republicans came out with what they are calling their new skinny stimulus plan. Some of the items included are $300 in extra weekly federal unemployment benefits until December 27th, money for the Paycheck Protection Program, an additional $10 billion for the U.S. Postal Service, and funding for school reopenings, coronavirus testing, and vaccine production. However, no mention of another round of $1,200 payments to individuals. Yeah, this is what I was afraid of, at least partly. It looks like the stimulus checks, which happen to be the only part that would help people like me, may be getting cut out entirely. This is unacceptable both for Americans in need and for the movement, as those checks are the closest thing we've gotten to UBI, and they need to maintain high priority if UBI is to maintain its place in the discussion. Double down on the outreach, gang. Make it clear that if the Senate does not support monthly payments, they will be losing their seats, and we will be making sure of it by calling every one of their supporters if we have to. Pew Research recently conducted a new study of permanent UBI favorability with a large sample size of around 11,000 Americans. They found majority support overall of 54%. Other studies have found higher, and this is almost certainly due to the wording of the questions. Unsurprisingly, support was lower among Republicans and the elderly, but curiously, the demographic breakdown shows some 73% of Black and 63% of Hispanic adults support it compared with just 35% of white adults. Since we also know that support skews toward the poor and, unfortunately, systemic racism has a large effect on income, I think this is largely correlational with income. In the continuing collapse of all things, I have a new warning for you. If you're in the Southeast, heads up, you've got dual hurricanes headed your way. It's an unprecedented occurrence, so yay, more history making. Scott Santens, who lives in the area, had a rather scathing remark, quote, "It's at times like this, when you're staring down the barrel of 2 hurricanes for the first time in recorded history, that you think about all the people who have ever denied climate change, and you wonder if they could actually be more useful as sandbags." End quote. Brutal, but pretty funny. That said, this is an intersection of Yang's policies. Not only does Yang have a fantastic climate change policy, but I think he's also right that a huge part of the reason that it's been so easy for people to be duped into dismissing climate change is due to economic insecurity. When you're barely getting by, you don't particularly want to hear that you need to worry about an impending environmental disaster, all the less so when it's framed as saving the planet, when the most apt framing would be saving ourselves. The planet will be fine, it's us humans that are screwed. I think if we had a UBI and people didn't have to worry about their immediate survival and were living in an abundance mindset, they'd be much more willing to take on this more abstract threat. Politico put out a fact-check article on the rumors flying around about the USPS. In short, it says that there is no immediate danger of the USPS being shut down or stopping operations anytime soon, that there is no consensus among experts in the field as to the extent of the delivery slowdowns or their cause, other than some limited fallout from DeJoy's cuts to overtime, that DeJoy was appointed by a board of governors who were voted in by members of both parties in the Senate, and Trump has no direct control over DeJoy, and that the hype over the removal of boxes and sorting machines is overblown. That last I rather suspected, which is why I didn't report on it sooner. I figured it might just be normal operations adjusting to shifting geographic and modern needs for physical mail, and the article confirmed as much. Similar adjustments have been happening regularly for decades. The biggest concern as far as the logistics of voting by mail is really the potential flood of ballots that could come at the last minute from procrastinating voters. So get your ballot in early. Of course, I still consider the biggest threat to be Trump attempting to claim the election results fraudulent, which is a danger overlooked by the author's musings on why Trump might want to interfere with the USPS. In the ongoing march of cities joining the UBI march, Boston has joined. Has your city? If not, start an event at the link below. TechSoup is hosting a digital activism webinar on August 27th, featuring Income Movement's Stacey Rutland. Presenters will give real-world examples that marry online and offline organizing with digital organizing tools and tactics. They will discuss how they've built out their online organizing strategy through virtual events, petitions, crowdsourcing platforms, digital marketing tactics, and more to mobilize their community in this new all-digital environment. Sign up below. The Humanity First movement has a new nonprofit going for us. Math Movement is dedicated to educating Yang Gang volunteers and others in the art of community organizing and developing a highly trained grassroots network. It's a 501c4 with a duly conducted volunteer board. If you have some time to learn how to better help the movement, look them up at the link below for some free training. Finally, if you live in Illinois and have a Facebook account, Andrew Yang and DDP say they owe you up to $400 for misuse of your data. That's right, they are paying $650 million in total claims. Follow the DDP link below to sign up to claim your fair share. And that'll do it for today's Yang Daily. If you want to see this podcast continue, please contribute what you can at patreon.com/YangDaily. Check out the TechSoup webinar and Math Movement to become a better advocate. Claim your share of the Facebook settlement if you live in Illinois. Help recruit other organizations to the cause and get everyone to sign the UBI petitions. Flood Congress and Trump with calls, tweets, and letters using the ResistBot or Income Movement easy contacts below. If you need financial help, consult Humanity Forward, the Income Movement Aid Database, United Way, or the H3 podcast thread. And don't forget to Yang Daily.